Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining today's community webinar, The Power of Advocacy for FA Research. I'm Jen Farmer from FARA, and we're going to get started. So thanks everyone for joining today. I'd first like to acknowledge that FARA's webinar series are sponsored by several of our industry partners, Biogen, PTC Therapeutics, Amgen, Lexeo Therapeutics, Larimar Therapeutics, Design Therapeutics, and Solid Biosciences. So thank you for your support in helping us bring this education series to our community. And this is the first education webinar for 2025. So advocacy can mean many different things. Advocacy can be raising awareness when you're in the grocery line and you explain to somebody what Friedreich's ataxia is. Advocacy can be when you request accommodations that you might need at school or at work. Today, we're going to focus on advocacy that advances FA research. And we have heard from several of our FA community members in the past weeks that they are concerned about things that are happening in the US, changes to our health and medical research infrastructure that could impact FA research. And so we thought it would be timely for us to talk about FARA's research advocacy and how we advocate, but also what's happening outside the US. I think now more than ever, this is so important for us. Research is global and it requires this level of collaboration. We all know that FA is a rare disease, and so we have to engage the talent of researchers who have an interest or an expertise in FA, no matter where they are in the world. And we have to apply those, new technologies and new insights. And also, we know that for phase 3 registration clinical trials, we need global participation from clinical sites and from our patient community. So our FA research really is global, and that is why we divided this webinar today into two sections. And so my colleague, Miriam Ray, who's the Director of Global Relations and Initiatives, is going to start off the webinar with our global research and advocacy partners. And that'll be the first half of the webinar. And then we will switch over and have the US conversation with Ron Bartek and Bridget Brennan. And in between, we're going to leave time for question and answer. If you have questions, I encourage you to put them in the Q&A box, which should be at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Miriam.
Thank you, Jen. Again, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining. I hope from all over the globe. I couldn't see the participants, but I'm hoping we have a global audience today. Actually, here we have the globe, and I just want to highlight some of FARA's international partners. FARA actively collaborates with various FA advocacy groups through the globe, and sometimes those are not really specific to FA, for example, like the Spanish or the Italian one, and sometimes those are really FA specific. To give an example of FARA Australia, for example, with whom FARA has a long-standing relationship to co-fund research projects, as an example. Or Ataxia UK in the UK, with whom we hosted recently, jointly with the NAF in the US, the International Conference on Ataxia. So these partnerships, as Jed said, have the aim to advance research, not only by co-funding, but also by facilitating information exchange. The local advocacy partners know very well their community and their regulation, and FARA try to leverage the resources we have to facilitate any work those local advocacies may need. Joint funding of research projects, as I said, leveraging also international conferences, but also raising more awareness, education across the globe. Let me just move the slide, sorry. And here I would like to give a few examples of those long-standing partnerships. You all remember the FA petition we have put together in 2021 This has assembled voices across the globe. This was meant to the FDA, but all the letter of support and testimonials we had from the globe are being reused now as an example by the local advocacy groups to support access to OMAV in their local countries. Another example is visiting new emerging areas on FA. Last year, FARA did have a trip to India. It was supposed to meet with the community to provide more education on FA, but also meet the researchers and the clinicians who are funded, among others, by FARA locally. Another example is to reach out and visit and participate to annual meetings with more recent advocacy groups like the Czech Republic entity. And last but not least, contribute with other researchers and clinicians who are FARA funded and co-funded by local organizations to present together a piece of education to the community, like their annual meeting in France, for example. And with that, we would like today to highlight some case specifics of those partnerships that are not, that are too many to highlight in one webinar. So today we will have three persons. We will have representative, the president of the French Association, Stéphane Rouillon, and then we will move to Greece. We have the president and founder of the Hellenic Association, and we will finish with Mrs. Amália Maranhão from Brazil. So with that, I will pass it to Stéphane.
Yes, hello. I hope you can hear me. Good, good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. Miriam, can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So yeah, thanks for the opportunity to share a bit on what we do at the advocacy level. And maybe just before I talk about the French FA Association, just the personal level, I had been involved in the FA world for about 10 years. One of my children was diagnosed with FA when he was 6 years old. He's now about 17 years old. I was actually living in London when he was diagnosed, and then we decided to relocate to France. So got involved with the French Association around 2018. It's a pretty known, in the FA space. It was created 40 years ago. Maybe one specificity is that we have the notion of subscribers. So people are actually paying a small fee to be part of the advocacy group. We have around 1,000 of them, out of which half of carriers are patients, and half of them are relatives most of the time. So we have four main goals or missions, if you can. So the first one is, of course, as Miriam said, to finance research projects. So every year we publish yearly call for tenders to the scientific community. We had been doing that for the last 2 years with the French Rare Disease Foundation, and we also have regular touch points with FARA. Sometimes we co-fund, as Miriam said, some research projects. We are involved as much as we can also internationally. So that's one of the goals. In parallel of that, we also have a second mission, which is also to help our community to improve their daily life while the research is progressing. So we provide some services to our community, such as psychological support, social support, assistance with concrete activities on the daily life, like how to better work with computers, communication tools. I mean, some quite concrete, services that we provide to our members. Also for them, to create links between themselves, so that they can share between themselves, know each other, and also we represent them, towards towards our institutions, whether it's national or international, and to achieve these goals. If you can click, Miriam, please. We do have a scientific council to support the the advocacy group to make some decisions around research projects, etc. We also have a medical and non-medical council to inform and assist us. In terms of the organization, there are 18 board members. All of us are volunteers. All of us are really closely linked to FA in our families. So yeah, we do everything we can in addition, to being a caregiver or to our job, etc. And in 2022, we decided for the first time to hire a full-time employee in order to absorb, all the additional work that the AFAF wants to do. Yeah, so I will not go into the details of the organization, but yeah, there was quite a lot of changes in the last 2 years. The former president of AFAF was somebody called Juliette Diozer. She had been the president, I think, for 25 years. So I was elected as the president in 2023. Actually, I was the only candidate, so it was not very difficult. And then we changed the whole structure of how the advocacy group operates. We created 3 main domains to support our missions. The first domain is everything around research and international relationship. A second domain also with the vice president around improving the daily life and the services, etc. And a third main domain around communication and events, because this is of course how we get our funds, from people donating to us, organizing events, etc. And then we have a lot of groups. One thing which is not, I think, on the slide, we also created a function that we call Voice of Patients, that does manage all of the survey we are doing toward our community, etc. Because it's of course a big part of our organization to represent, the voice of the patients. And just yeah, maybe one thing which we thought could be interesting to share with you. So here you can see some examples of events where we participate, locally. With our community, also with the FARA team. We also participate, of course, in important, FA-related events, like the last one, in November in London. And maybe one thing which we think could be of interest to the community is that regarding the early access program for OMAV in France, because we are one of the countries where the early access was granted. So as Myriam mentioned, before that, we joined the worldwide petition that was done a few years ago, and then since that we contributed a lot to the evaluations that have been made by the local authority in France to grant the early access program. So it represented quite a significant work for AFAF to answer the questionnaire, to convey what is the real life of an FA patient. So yeah, we did that twice. So a lot of questionnaire to complete. We've also asked to be heard by the evaluation committee to make sure that they understood our the voice of the patients really. Now on OMAV, the early access program has been renewed. So until the end of 2025, it is still an early access program. What we've done as well is that we conducted semi-directive qualitative interviews, with some patients who were, taking OMAV. Some of you might have seen we presented a poster at the last, ICAR conference in London to provide to the community what was the voice of the patient, really from a perception perspective. And then in addition to that, we did a more, let's say, quantitative survey what is there, the perception of the patients who are within the early access. What is the impacts on their daily life, positive, negative, etc. We received more than 100 responses, and we just finished to do the analysis of this survey. It's now on the public domain, and we now deciding what do we do next on with the conditions to represent the real life conditions from the voice of our patients.
Thank you, Stefan. That was a great example of advocacy in France as a local entity, how fast actually we're able to achieve this. Thank you. If we have time in the Q&A, I have a couple of questions on the next steps of the survey. And with that, we will pass it to Vasilis Karatsias. Vasilis?
Good afternoon, all. Good morning to the States. Thank you for having me. Thank you for being between friends. I'm Vasilis Karatsias. I'm the president of the Hellenic Association of Friedreich's Ataxia, and I also have another, let's say, chapeau related to the rare diseases. I'm also the president of Rare Disease Greece, and I'm referring to that because sometimes it's important to have to use the whole leverage of the roles that you have and the whole cards that you have at play in order to achieve a goal. So I'm here in front of you today discussing who we are and what we are doing in this small part of the world. We are newly established. It's our 6th year right now, and we have a similar goal with all of us. I mean, we are a family. We envision a world in some years from now or some decades where FA would be treatable. And this is something that drives all our actions. So we have formulated a strategic action plan. It has been revised twice right now, and our actions are spanning from public awareness, assistance to regulatory authorities, educational activities for our patients and the medical community, support to our patients, advocacy, and of course, funding research and development. Next slide, please, Miriam. It's an okay, so we are in the partnership. In the international domain, we collaborate closely, and we are very proud to cooperate with FARA because it's our home. We are, as Stefan, we are party to Euroataxia, which is the European Federation on Ataxia Associations. As Stefan, I'm also a member of the board, and this is important because this creates a cluster of actions, and this, let's say, coordinates actions at the European level. We are working with EURORDIS, which is the rare disease umbrella in Europe, and this came into play also when OMAV was about to be discussed before the approval of the EMA. So we need to get in thorough discussions with EURORDIS. That has been, let's say, the organization that on behalf of the EMA has been assigned to make some interviews and discuss on the unmet needs of our patients. So it's very important to be on that ground also. We cooperate with the European Patients Forum. I'm also the president of the Ethics Committee of the EPF. So it's important because this is also a collocutor of EMA. So it's important to have other patient organizations, even not Ataxian ones, to be subscribed to your goal. We are trying to, we support actively the global registry and the GCC. And as you can see in the next slide, we do so in various ways in Greece. Here are some photos of our recent events. One in, we tried to have an annual conference. We had one in 2022, a big one, 2023. We organized it in cooperation with Euroataxia. And this year we will host another conference in probably in early November. So we will send invitations soon, and we'll be happy to see you, all or some of you in Greece. Next slide. Oh, no. Okay, so let's keep it here and let's discuss a little bit about the research and how we try to leverage and invest on research and development, even though research and development funds are very limited in Greece. So we try to use another perspective, meaning that we don't have the amount of funds that are available in global partnerships. So what we do, we try to assist our researchers in submitting their grant applications, meaning that we provide funding for actual basic research, and this is something that it is that it is within our means and capabilities. Of course, it's something that still remains in basic sciences and funding some preclinicals. Right now, at the moment, we have 3 efforts actively in Greece. One being funded by FARA, and thank you very much for doing so. It's fantastic that FARA has reached out to this part of the world and trusted our partners. This shows the global cooperation that is needed in order to find innovative solutions. And the other 2 has been granted in national and European projects. And we hope that by the end of this year will be the funding will be secured, and we will move forward with this domain.
Thank you, Vasilis.
Another minute. Finally, what we have done is we created a map, an interactive map of Greece with all the clinical centers that is available to our patients, with also the physicians and the clinical sites that can host our patients. And this, let's say, is being supported by AI tools. So with plain language and very useful and very comprehensive to our patients, they can type a question and then they can get an easy answer. So the Orphanet, the orphan codes, the clinical guidelines, and all the materials that are available globally have been, let's say, fed to this AI tool that we have sponsored, and it will be available next month to all our patients. And of course, we vision that to be translated also to English and to be available to the global community. Thank you, Miriam.
Thank you, Vasilis. Bridget? No, I thought we had a question from Bridget. Well, thank you, Vasilis. And with this, we will move on to Amalia.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Amalia Maranhão. I'm the mother of an FAer, Antonio. And first, I take the opportunity to express my gratitude to Ron, Jen, and the entire FARA team for all the support given to us. Your work has been a constant lesson on how to lead and engage a community. We started in Brazil trying to adapt the idea of the registry to our limited conditions and tools. All these years, our work has been totally online and mainly grassroots. We have our national registry, and the key mobilizer has been posting news about clinical trials and the prospect of clinical trials in the country. Our registry is the only mapping of the patients in Brazil. We have 772 people identified so far along these 10 years. Partnership with Dr. Franca of Unicamp was key. On one side, we had patients all over the country in need of specialized attention. On the other side, Franca had interest in research, but not enough patients. We began bringing patients to Unicamp, and today there are more than 150 patients assisted in the center, the biggest in Brazil. They are part of the TREC-FA too. We have an active community of 280 FAers in our WhatsApp group and another one of 160 parents. We are in daily contact. Every day you comment whatever is on the news about FA and rare diseases. In addition, we have an Instagram profile where we give information about FA and also put pressure on policymakers. It's our main tool. Some of what have been done together in the last 10 years. At the beginning, mainly we did information dissemination about the research pipeline. It was FARA's website translated into Portuguese. The goal was to remove the idea that the disease was hopeless. Hope is fundamental for engagement. With the community constant growth, we started to mobilize people to participate in Reata's clinical trial. It was 28, and you had 440 people at that time. One Brazilian person was included at the last minute of the recruitment. In 2019, we started a good relationship with the regulatory agency, sending letters to them explaining about the community and the disease, followed by short videos and pictures of kids and young patients. Soon after, we petitioned the regulatory officers to expedite the analysis of vatiquinone in clinical trial and got a warm and fast response. In Brazil, there is no formal communication channel between the regulatory agency and patient associations. We had to search for bridges to do so. It was a kind of trial and error. We did an online bombardment of the regulatory agency post about Rare Disease Day this year, posted by them at the last minute of the working day. One of the FA mothers was keeping an eye on the profile and alerted us about the post. In a couple of hours, we had more than 1,200 views, 920 sharings of the post, and almost 2,000 comments asking for the expedition of the registration of the medication. Next day, we accidentally found a form distributed by the agency to evaluate their public communication with the public about health alerts like vaccination. More than 200 people answered the questionnaire and wrote OMAV now on the space reserved to the comments. In the same week, we sent a letter to the agency requesting a meeting to give the patient's perspective regarding OMAV, and saying that delaying analysis was creating a lot of stress and accelerating the deterioration of the FA's condition. To our surprise, the conversation happened last week. 3 of our board members, 4 patients, 2 of them are on OMAV, and a bunch of officers from the agency. As expected, they gave their excuses for the delay, but promised to make a decision in April. Biogen answered the last pending question last week, so we hope we are going to have a decision soon. About the online mobilization, what we did lately. A Brazilian FAer won a bronze medal in Paris Paralympics. On the Rare Disease Day, she posted a video talking about FA, the community's need for treatment, and added testimonials in video of at least other 10 FAers that we had prepared for this little speech. So far, that video has reached more than 402,000 people, 20,000 likes, 24,000 shared posts, and 3,000 comments. This is helping to make FA more known in the country and hopefully putting some more pressure on the regulatory agency to make a decision about the new medication. We are planning to try to mobilize the Brazilian Congress after OMAV has its efficacy and safety approval. The second step is to have the medication incorporated into the healthy public system in a process more or less similar to the one in most European countries. We have a weakness that you haven't been able to change the situation. We lack skills in fundraising. All our work is financed by ourselves, by a few people, no more than 10 or 15. And we need to learn a lot about fundraising. And we also do some real world data collection about the clinical conditions of the patients. And I think it helped Biogen to prepare the documents, the papers for the approval of OMAV in Brazil. And essentially, that's what we do. I think we work kind of intuitively. We didn't have resources and structure to have a strategic planning. So we work on opportunities. When you have an opportunity, you use it. So my advice, based on our experience, an online platform is good, but it's not a guarantee by itself. We always have to be alert about the correct time to trigger a campaign. Most of the time it happens in the moment with no room for planning. You have to be fast and first before other rare diseases with better structure take the spotlight, other rare disease associations. There is a kind of competition. So it requires a lot of work, but it's also very exciting.
Thank you,
That's what-
Amalia. And you achieved a lot. You mentioned we didn't achieve a lot. You did. Thank you. I'm afraid we will hold on for the Q&A session till the end. So I will pass it right to Jen.
Thank you, Miriam. And thank you so much, Amalia and Stefan and Vasilis, for sharing a little bit about your organizations and all of the work that you're currently doing. And I hope folks really, heard themes that are very similar to activities that we have ongoing in the US at FARA, whether it's assisting researchers in getting the early funding to move science forward or find other research dollars, to assembling the patient voice, whether that's through registries or surveys to provide direct testimony, to mobilize the community in grassroots efforts. And I think what we're all learning right now is there's a lot of advocacy that we need to do together related to access issues as treatments get approved. There's a whole nother level of opportunity for us to, make sure that treatments that are approved get to the people who need them. This is just a map I wanted to quickly share that shows not only the advocacy groups that Miriam shared with you earlier, but all of our FA clinical research sites, as well as all the FA research labs. And I had a community member reach out to me a few weeks ago. She's really concerned about reductions in US government funding for FA research. And I shared with her that there's a real silver lining to the fact that we are a global community. And that is that not all research happens in the US, not all research is being funded by FARA or US government agencies. A lot of research is being funded in other countries by other governments. And we've got great partners like the folks you met today who are helping us make that happen. And so kind of with that intro to some of our US advocacy efforts, just want to share that, at a high level, when FARA says advocacy or thinks advocacy, some of our priorities are around funding research, drug development, and access issues. And today we're going to have Bridget Brennan, who is a FARA board director, our general counsel, and our director of advocacy. She wears all the hats at FARA for us now. And she's going to share a little bit more about what's been going at FARA related to our advocacy programs. And also our co-founder and president and our original advocate, Ron Bartek, is also going to talk with Bridget in this next session. So Bridget, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Jen. So I'm sure everyone's aware there's been a lot of changes happening in the US recently. And I would like to start by saying whenever a new administration comes in, there's always changes. What's different about this one is obviously the extent and the speed and sort of the huge cuts in staff and funding. And while we right now do not know what the impacts of all those changes will be, we're left with a little bit of a concern because we're insecure, and we're seeing that even in our stock market today around the tariffs, right? People are unsure about whether these changes are a good thing or a bad thing, and when people are unsure, they get concerned, and so people react to that. So right now, I will tell you for FA research, we haven't seen much changes in where we were prior to January 20th, other than delays in grant reviews. But that's not to say that we're not watching and we're not engaged with all of our stakeholders to make sure that we keep FA research in the conversation at every stage of the process. So I wanted to take a few minutes. I know we have a little limited amount of time, and I want to give you a little snapshot of, even though it seems very challenging right now, there is a lot that you can still do, both as an organization, FARA, and as individuals within the community. And advocacy is really just to take any action to bring change. And that action, as we've heard from our partners around the world, can be in many, many forms. It can be raising awareness, it could be lobbying, it could be public campaigns, research and gathering evidence, community engagement, and of course, building coalitions. And I'm going to take a moment to just hit on each of these quickly. The first one, raising awareness. This is really just to educate the public about an issue and its impact. And we do this in so many ways. Whenever you're doing a fundraiser or you participate in one that FARA is running, you are helping to raise an awareness around FA. And that conversation is not limited to just our community. When we go out and we fundraise in our home communities with people that may not be impacted by FA, we share our story, and that story then gets generated to other communities. And that is just raising awareness. That is part of advocacy. You can share your story. A lot of times people will write articles or letters to the editor or blogs that tell a little bit about what the FA experience or rare disease experience is. And then we have taken a very active role in speaking at public meetings. We know that in the US, we have had to go to many different Medicaid hearings, and we've had a lot of community members join us there to share their stories. That's one way to do it. We've also participated in rare disease events or congressional hearings. But right now, a really great way that you can get involved is to go to your town halls. When your legislators are home and they're holding a coffee or they're holding a town hall in your community, go to those town halls, go to those coffees and raise your hand and tell your story and let your legislators know, hey, I'm concerned about the cuts to the NIH. I'm concerned about the staffing reductions and how that will impact FA research. What are you going to do to reassure me? And then hold them to it, which brings us to our next slide, is lobbying. Lobbying is basically contacting a policymaker to advocate for change. And this can be a congressional member, it could be a state member, it could actually be someone at the FDA who's working on a guidance for our community or the rare disease community. But you're contacting them because you want them to go one way versus the other. And when you're at that town hall and you've met with your legislator and you've asked them to look into something, then when you reach out to them 2 or 3 weeks later to say, so what did you do? You can do that by an email. You can do it by a phone call. You can stop by their offices. You're following up and you're holding them accountable to some of the decisions they're making in DC. Now, not everybody's comfortable doing that, and that's okay. We have lots of other ways you can get involved. There are big events that are completely organized for you. You don't need to do anything. You just sign up, and one's held in February for Rare Disease Week. We have one in the summer when legislators are home called Rare Across America. And then our community works with the National Ataxia Foundation. This will be our 7th year doing a United Against Ataxia Hill Day, which has been very, very productive for both of our communities. So this is just a snapshot of ways you can reach out to your legislator and let them know, start a conversation. I have to say, when Jen said, the original advocate was Ron Bartek, he's also the original role model for all of us, because when he was faced with the conversations of there's nothing, you're too small, there's nothing we can do to help you, he kept the conversation going. And that's what we need to do right now. We need to keep FA in the conversation in any regard that we can. And so we do that by getting involved in different events or reaching out to our own legislators. If you can go to the next one, please. So then there's also opportunities to do public campaigns. And FARA has done some of these in the past, like our patient-focused drug development meeting, or when we hold an ICAR conference. And this is where bringing people together to raise awareness and to talk about what the issues are. But also, when you see the word protest, it really just means you recognize something that needs to be fixed or corrected, and you want to bring attention to it. So I would say that our Pediatric Inclusion Roundtable, it was a protest. It was saying, hey, we don't want children to be left out of clinical trials. We want them to be in clinical trials earlier. And so Ron's going to talk a little more about that specific opportunity, but I just want to say that that is actually just a great way for us to raise awareness and to ask for some change that's going on in the drug development process. FARA is on all the social media posts, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and we do 3 monthly newsletters. If you're not signed up for our advocacy newsletter, please do. We try to give you some insight as to what's happening within our community and what bills might be coming up that you might want to reach out to your legislators on. So those can be done right on our website. And so if you moving on to the next slide, Miriam. Research and evidence. Now, this is something that's very helpful when you're trying to go in and advocate for change. You want to have some facts and circumstance. And we've done this in the past by looking at, for example, the burden of disease, or even when we're trying to get the pediatric disease priority review voucher program reinstated, we talked about this graph about how the program has been so successful and so many drugs have been approved because of this program. So having that data is very effective when you're trying to persuade someone to move on a topic. So what are we doing right now? Well, we're reaching out to all of our labs and we are asking them to tell us, hey, what's changed since these staffing or funding cuts have happened? Have you been impacted with your research? Can you give us specific examples? Because then when we go to the Hill, we can share those specific examples with our legislators. So that is what we're tracking at the moment, but you can also do that in your own life. If you have a change in your circumstance, you can send an email to your legislator to let them know what's happening directly to you. Let's go on to the next slide. And then community engagement. This is what we talked about all day. Everybody getting together, talking about sort of the needs and developing solutions together. We use our symposiums to talk about our pipeline, to figure out where we are and where we need to go. We sometimes hold focus groups to help develop our educational materials, which we share throughout the world. And of course, Miriam made a great example of highlighting the petition that the whole worldwide community worked on together. And then the last point is a really important one right now. And I'm hoping it's going to give some reassurance for those of you that are out there that are a little bit overwhelmed with everything happening in DC. This is just a list of the people I could think of off the top of my head of all the different organizations that Ron, myself, and our colleague Emma Potter all work with every week. We are on webinars with these groups. We are at meetings with these groups. We are talking about the issues. We're sharing when there's impacts within our communities and how other people are dealing with it. And through those conversations, we then identify, hey, can we move the needle on an issue? Can we all talk about this one point? And that leads to the next slide, which is coalition letters. Since January, this is the list of coalition letters that FARA has signed onto. And at the end of each line, you'll see that I put a number. And FARA is a strong but small group. If you join our forces with 602 other organizations on a Research America letter, now it's pretty impactful. It's hard to ignore us. So we have been working very diligently with our advocacy partners to say, hey, here's what's happening in our community, what's happening in your community. Let's write a letter about this. Can we get some movement on this issue? And we will continue to do that. We post all of these on our website. So, you can take a look at as we move forward on what issues we're talking about. But this is a really great way that we've been working with all of our coalition partners since the beginning of the year, and even before. If you go on, we have prior years that we've worked with all of our partners. And I'm going to pass the baton off to Ron to talk specifically about one great coalition building effort.
Thank you, Bridget, and thank you for your kind remarks. Before I do that, I want to say out loud to Amalia, Stefan, and Vasilis how amazed we all are and deeply grateful for the very effective advocacy and progress you are leading in your 3 countries. So it's just really inspiring. So thank you. Then for this one example, this example really does demonstrate the power. I mean, that's the name of this webinar, right? The power of advocacy. And here's one tremendous illustration of how all of us working together in such coalitions really do have the power to make change on behalf of FA research. We all know what the challenge was. We got our first FA approved treatment on Rare Disease Day of 2023. And that approved treatment was for 16-year-olds and older. And we know how many of our patients are under 16 and how disappointed we were. First, when Jen and I were down in Texas working with the developer at the get-go to encourage them to go lower in the registration study. They said they had to start with adults. We said, go down to 10 or 12. Well, we were able to talk them down to 16 by emphasizing various aspects of the benefits. So we'd been working from the beginning to try to get children involved in clinical research. It didn't work out as well as we hoped. So we got that approval for 16-year-olds and older. So beginning right away, we launched an effort to coordinate everybody involved, all the stakeholders, to include pediatric subjects, to include our children and children of other rare and common diseases. We're all facing the same issue. Let's get them involved in clinical trials early so we can start preventing the symptoms rather than trying to treat those symptoms later. So what we did is we began immediately after the approval working with both the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration here in the US, and the National Institutes of Health to organize a discussion, a full day discussion of this issue. And we were amazed and really thrilled that all of them signed up right away. I mean, we didn't have to convert anybody at the FDA or the NIH. Their leadership said from the beginning, we're all in. This is something very important to us too. And so we signed them up to do the opening presentations at the July 16th roundtable discussion last year that lasted all day, and emphasized that we need to get access to safe, effective therapies at the time of maximum benefit for our patients. And we all know that the earlier you treat these patients, the better. So that roundtable discussion that day was just really powerful. We knew by the end of that day that we would form an alliance to socialize that powerful message along the lines of all stakeholders, all the drug companies, including the ones that work on FA, and including other rare diseases, and all the, we had to convert the other patient advocates, and so that everybody knew the FDA had pivoted. It's time to get kids involved in early clinical research. We've had an obvious impact. You can see on the poster to the right, those were the FDA and NIH leaders, that, the highest leadership in both agencies that spoke that gospel that day. And this alliance is now socializing that message across all the other stakeholders. We've already had powerful impact. We have now the pediatric study of OMAV, or Skyclarys, already underway. Laramar's frataxin protein replacement trial is in children already, and PTC's vatiquinone is under FDA review. That includes children, and Lexeo, one of our gene therapy companies, with our participation, had its meeting recently with the FDA and got approval to include children in their gene therapy trial. So this alliance and all the work that we're all doing together has had a powerful impact already. Final note is we are not ignoring other regulatory agencies. We're working closely, and so are our industry partners with the EMA, for example. So we need a global effort to get our children involved in clinical research. We never want this to happen to us again or anybody else. So that's one illustration of the power of your advocacy.
So Ron and Bridget, thank you so much for that quick tour of all the things that you've all been working on so hard for a really long time. I know we want to open it to questions, so we're going to do that now, but just wanted to share with folks the link for how to sign up for the newsletter. And we've put together an info sheet as well to go along with today for some of the US specific issues that we're following, and we've heard from community members people are concerned about. So we wanted to put together just an info sheet that gives you links for where you can find more information. And so I think Kellen is going to drop that in the chat, but we'll also share it by email to everyone who's registered. So if I could ask all the panelists from today to maybe come on and put your cameras on, and we can get started with some of the questions that we have coming in. I know that we've got a few questions related to some changes in the US, and I've got a few questions as well for our international partners, but maybe we'll take one or two questions from the chat first. So Bridget, it looks like this one might be for you. What are we doing related to CDMRP? And for those who don't know, CDMRP is a way that medical research is funded in the US. It's a large program with congressionally mandated funding for medical research.
So the question stems out of the fact that when our last continuing resolution was signed, there was a 57% reduction in the fund that was allotted to this program. And everyone did not know exactly how that was going to be applied. We are learning that that is not going to be a straight across the board reduction, but will have an effect on different disease types differently. So we are watching to see if there's going to be any change in the listed topic areas, which hereditary ataxia is the topic area we fall under. And this program was an initiative between us and NAFT. And so working with NAFT and other community groups, we have been really staying on top of what updates they've been making on this reduction and how they're applying it. In fact, there was a briefing held this morning on the Capitol Hill on this specific program, which I will probably get an update on later today because I was not there. I was here preparing for this. And but there are many organizations following this, and we are one of them. So we will keep you updated on that.
And we are in the middle of the appropriation cycle for CDMRP. We have to ask for it every year. And so if you want to help Bridget with appropriations and put in a request, you should email her. And she will send you a whole packet of materials that make filing the request super easy. I've already done 2 for Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Jen. Yes, it's not hard to do, but you do have to ask to be on the list every year. So every year I need constituents to actually ask their members. So it's very important to have community engagement here.
I'm going to ask a quick question, maybe a different topic, but Stefan, during your presentation, you mentioned that your group recently finished kind of a survey and a voice of the patient, like putting things together related to Skyclarys. And I know Vasilis, Amalia, Farah, like we're all dealing with issues related to access for OMAV. And so is the report that your group prepared and the survey results, you said they were just made publicly available. Could you just share a little more about that and where we might be able to find it?
Yeah. So for now, it's we discussed that with the French reference network. Get their views on the results. We had a pretty good feedback where we know it is quite a complementary pieces of data in addition to what the neurologist can measure in the hospitals, etc. Really representing the real life voice of the patient. For now, it's on our website. It hasn't yet been translated. But yeah, we're gonna share it with the community as well. And one of the things we have to decide. I mean, we might do another survey more with a view to be published a scientific report, because at least in France, I know that the regulators are really looking a lot into what has been publicly published in the scientific papers, right? So that's one of the things we have to decide, because I think it can be useful both for the local community, but also maybe for the wider international community.
And Jen, could I ask the same set of people a quick question? Amalia, you gave us a very good rendition of how you're working directly with the regulatory body in Brazil. I'd like to hear from Vasilis and Stefan. Are you trying to establish direct relationships with the EMA, or are you otherwise working through organizations like Eurordis and the special committee of patient advocates to communicate our FA needs to the EMA?
Right.
Vasilis? Yeah.
Okay. So thank you for the question, Ron. The thing with the EMA is that it's slightly different from the FDA. I mean, it's not so open on direct discussions, and it's not so open on being educated. Okay.
Right.
So you need to have, let's say, an indirect approach. So what we do is mostly we cooperate with bigger and more, let's say, comprehensive organizations like Eurordis. And the similar thing we are trying to do right now with the Euroataxia, because it's more, let's say, easy, and gives you the opportunity to strengthen your power with a more inclusive organization. Eurordis has more than 700 participating members, so you understand it's really big. That's why I started saying that I use sometimes the chapeau of the Rare Disease Federation, which I'm heading, because there you have 35 associations under my umbrella. So there you have a bigger, let's say, saying. And by saying that, I want to thank Miriam, because she was invited and participated last week in our annual conference. It was a 2 days event, one in person and one hybrid, and it was high level. So in this conference, we had also members of the European Parliament, members of the EMA, and regulators. So you need to give them a place in order to speak freely under the same table. But it's not educational, it's more give them the flexibility and the openness to discuss.
Right, thank you. Jen, you want me to take a crack at Chandra's excellent question?
Sure. So folks who aren't looking at the chat, Chandra has asked, are we concerned about some of the changes in FDA leadership? There have been some key people who've recently had to resign. And so, what are the concerns related to some of those resignations? Sure. So you can take it, Ron.
Okay. Answer to your excellent question, Chandra, is yes, we are concerned. I will give a special nod to the fact that we've lost 2 of the 3 FDA leaders that were such enthusiastic participants in that July 16th meeting last year and gave the opening panel. Patrizia Cavazzoni, who had been the director of Center for Drug Evaluation, and Peter Marks, the director of the Center of Biologic Evaluation. Both of them have been powerful leaders, not just in pediatric inclusion, which was the subject of that conference, but in the other, the surrogate endpoints. Peter Marks has been the leader in accelerated approval and the use of surrogate biomarkers and endpoints to get earlier approvals. The sort of ameliorating issue is the fact that we didn't just work with that top tier of leadership. We worked right down to all of their office directors, all of their review, the review division leaders. And so we've got rich, rewarding relationships up and down the chain at the FDA and the NIH. So our concern is that loss of that leadership will slow the progress that we're so interested in, but I don't think it will stop the progress. I think we've got good enough relationships up and down the chain to keep this ball rolling as quickly as we possibly can.
Maybe another thing that we can share that I didn't appreciate until things started happening this year, but there's other legislation that is really important in terms of how FDA functions, and that's based on PDUFA legislation. And so it turns out that all the meetings that all of our industry sponsors have had with FDA since January 20th to today, they've all taken place. There has not been any slowdown in terms of meetings or feedback from FDA to our industry partners. And the other thing I recently learned is even with all the layoffs that are happening, there is some protection in that PDUFA legislation to some of those people Ron was just talking about within the review divisions themselves.
Yeah.
So there is and I did not know this until just recently, but there are some protections in place to keep that institutional knowledge in place.
And just to, for the sake of those who don't know about PDUFA, it's the Prescription Drug User Fee Act. So all the things that Jen's just talked about are not funded by federal appropriations that the Congress passes. They are paid by the industry partners to get their reviews done. So and they're substantial. They're almost half the FDA budget total. And so the people that are paid out of those user fees are okay so far. And so those reviews are taking place and the meetings are being conducted and with good results. So.
And Jen, if I could just jump in here, I also want to stress that drug development and healthcare is a bipartisan issue. And we have really good meetings on both sides of the aisle. And there are advocates that are champions and people on both sides of the aisle that want to see drug development to move forward. It's a little bit about working through the new system and figuring out what the best strategy will be. And, I'll give you a prime example that you can take away in all of your new emails that you're going to send to your members today is that, this administration has recognized that their focus is going to be on chronic conditions. That works for us. FA is a chronic condition. We are now going to make sure chronic condition is in all of our literature going out, right?
Yeah.
So you start to look at what is their focus and how can we use their focus to help move our agenda forward. But we've had very positive responses. And then the second point I want to make is I know people outside of the US may not be aware that many of these changes have been challenged in the court, and that takes time for that to go through the process. So we may see some things revert back and some things not, but it's a developing process. So we'll keep you updated. As we learn, you'll learn.
Well, thank you, Bridget, for ending on continuing to end on a positive note, which I think is important these days. And thank you to everyone who participated in the webinar today, those of you listening and those of you who joined us to share your experiences and introduce our wider community to your organizations and the work that you're doing. It was really great to hear the common themes. Vasilis talking about coalition building and that being, an important strategy in advocacy and one that we've also embraced. And then, globally coming together to bring the patient voice forward, whether it's in regulatory decision-making or access issues, and how we're kind of learning from each other, best practices and how to do that. And so thank you all so much. This hour went by way too fast.
Yeah.
And maybe as folks are exiting, Miriam, I'll just ask you to put up our upcoming calendar, because we do have a bunch more webinars planned for the next few months on some of our pipeline programs, as well as for FA Awareness Month. In May, we've got Flash Talks. So I hope we'll see all of you at these upcoming webinars. And again, thank you so much to Amalia and Stefan and Vasilis for joining us today.
Pleasure. Thanks to the FARA team.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks
all.
to you.
Mhm.